In 1086, on July 10th, King Canute IV of Denmark is murdered, assassinated by rebellious peasants. So it's July 10th, 1086. He was actually king of Denmark for 6 years. Canute IV, from 1080 until 1086. 1080, 1086. So, 1080s. That was some tough decade. That was a tough decade. Some tough years. So, King Canute IV. Who the fuck is this King Canute IV, and why was he hated by the peasants? Alright. Well, he was a violent, absolute ruler, right? So, he was authoritarian, statist. King Canute IV of Denmark used the Catholic Church to enhance his claim to the Danish throne, and he was aiming for the English throne. So, he was using Denmark just to take over England. Canute IV was overzealous in his collection of tithe, which is 10% of one's income, which would have been, back then, the produce. 10% of all the cabbage that the peasants produced, or the eggs, or the coal dust. 10% of whatever you had, rocks, to the church. So Canute, I've seen K-N-U-D, Canute the fourth. He had Egil Ragnarsen, the Jarl of Bornholm, who was Canute's hand-picked Jarl, which is governor of Bornholm. He had him hung because of his freelance Viking piracy. Now, they considered all the Denmark people a bunch of fucking Viking pirates. Nothing but a bunch of goddamn Viking pirates. But they had a government. And Canute IV killed Egil Ragnarsen, the Jarl of Bornholm. So if you're going to do your pirating, it's, I guess, moral to do it with an Imperial Royal Navy. Canute IV killed most of the Jarl governor Egil Ragnarsen's household. So he didn't just kill the Jarl of Bornholm. The Jarl. Who are you? I'm the Jarl around here. You're the Jarl. Yes. That's not scary. So, when King Canute IV had killed the Viking Egil Ragnarsen, it put all the Danish noble aristocracy, all the nobles, all the aristocrats. You're on notice now. So then one day, Canute IV was like, you know what, I want to invade England. You know, he wanted to rape Britannica, take the throne away from Sir William I, a.k.a. William the Conqueror, a.k.a. William the Bastard, who was feeble, and he was old, and he was a farter. So, Canute IV. Alright, so who is this Canute IV, right? I told you he's the, the martyred king of Denmark, the fourth, sometimes called Canute, but his bloodlines is this. Canute IV is the illegitimate son of King Sven II, Estridson of Denmark, and Canute succeeded his brother Harald III in 1081. But I thought he ruled for 6 years. Maybe he only ruled for 5. Then he marries Adela, right? So, he's the illegitimate son of King Sven II, Estridson of Denmark, and then some concubine. And then, after his brother Harald III, something happened to him, he succeeded him. Then he marries Adela, who's the sister of Count Robert of Flanders. So and then he builds a bunch of churches and monasteries. So that's who Canute IV is. You all caught up now? Okay. So, here's a story about how Canute IV got killed by a bunch of rebellious peasants. But Were they rebels without a cause? Or did they have a reason? I don't know. I mean, it was back in the 1080s. Back in the 1080s. I don't think they had running water. Or automobiles. Or paved roads. Housing. Did they even have housing back then? Did they have forks? When was forks invented? Like in the 1400s? They didn't even have forks then. So, Canute the Fourth was related to Canute the Great. And that made Canute the Fourth, his claim to England, is that much stronger and valid as William the Conqueror. William of Normandy, right? The Norman invasion. A.K.A. William the Bastard. So, Canute the Fourth was like, well, hell, if the bastard can run, you know, I'm the fourth. You know? Canute the Great. Don't you remember Canute the Great? Now, Canute the Great, this is true. He was actually the king of England. This Canute the Fourth is known as Saint Canute. History remembers Canute the Fourth as the king of Denmark. Saint Canute, but not Canute the Great. Only the king of England, Canute. Only he was great. So, Canute the Great, what he was famous for was he ordered the sea tides to stop. And seriously, Google this shit. Okay, he goes out to the sea tides and he's like, hey, stop with your waves. See, I'm the king. I'm the king. Instead, he just got a bunch of salt water in his boots. And so, if you Google his image, this whole situation, I don't see one way or another being any better. But the pictures of Canute the Great is he's a king being escorted out to the sea, to the ocean by his courtiers. And so he's sitting in a throne and he's ordering the sea to stop. Right? Stop, sea. Do as I say, sea. And then later on it gets twisted. So apparently he was just proving to his courtiers that it wouldn't work. See, I told you. I told you my powers doesn't extend to the sea. I knew it. But why would you need to prove, you know, that? Shouldn't you have just known? But if you had a bunch of, you know, yes men underlings telling you that your shit don't stink, maybe you don't even shit. Maybe you're like Kim Jong-un. You don't even have a butthole because you never shit. You never shit. So that's when he realized the limit of his power and only God could control the seas. He could only control the damn humans. But nature just didn't give a fuck about Canute the Great and his supposed power. So, the fact that that's your one fucking story, that's the, you know, even if it's a myth, right? The cherry tree, George Washington was so honest, he had to admit that he cut down the cherry tree. Why is that the myth, unless there's some element of truth there? He's carried out on his throne, right? King Canute orders the sea to stop. The tides to stop. They don't stop. And then he's like, see, I told you. I told you I can't control nature. So yeah, so this is the bloodlines we're dealing with. With the cooperation of Robert I, Count of Flanders, which was Canute IV's father-in-law, he ordered an armada of 1,000 Danish ships, 60 Norwegian ships, so 1,060 altogether, to assemble at Struer in the Limfjord, northern Jutland, in the summer of 1085. The 80s. As has been the tradition since the first Viking raid on England, local chiefs gathered ships, supplies, sailors, and warriors for a share of the profits, loot, slaves, and treasure taken during the raid. So you had an armada of 1,060 ships, 1,000 Danish ships, 60 Norwegian ships. And they were sitting there in Struer, in the Limfjord, northern Jutland, in the summer of 1085, ready to go invade England. So Canute IV had a hair up his ass. He goes, fuck it, let's go invade England. Now he's got 1,060 ships waiting for him. So, in the meantime, while these 1,060 ships were gathering together, while these warriors and sailors and supplies were coming together, Canute IV was going around getting a bunch of money. He was going in southern Jutland, ordering his people to pay tithes, right? 1/10 of all their produce to the church. And then at the same time, so he's getting money for the church, or so he says. And then at the same time, Canute IV instituted a new poll tax, the nefgiald, to raise money from the peasants for leding, 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 for the oncoming war with William the Conqueror, with William the Bastard, for Great Britain. So what is leding, that's Danish, ledung in Swedish, expeditio in Latin, leading in English. It's conscription. It was a draft of local men into the military to fight against the coastal fleets for seasonal excursions, typical for medieval Scandinavians. So this leading was just conscription. Yeah, we're going to go to war with England, and you need to fight with us, be a soldier, or give us some money so we can pay the soldiers. So he's going around collecting all these tithes, and then he's collecting an extra tax in order to pay for his oncoming war, in order to pay for these 1,060 ships. But if they're going to get all that loot, I don't understand why he's doing this. He's going around collecting taxes when it's about, they're about ready to go to war, but meanwhile, they're all ready in the northern Jutland to go to war, but he's down south trying to get some, extra. So who are you looting? Are you looting your own people, or are you looting England? So a different system was used in Anglo-Saxon England called the fyrd. So the Anglo-Saxons, they did the same thing. It was called the fyrd. Their conscription, their drafting of men into the military. So that's Canute. So Canute IV required leding, leding of the population. Canute used his own local officials, the fogeder. So he used the fogeder to go around to get the nefgiald to collect tithes and that new tax. So Canute's collection of fines for the ledingsbrud gave rise to the insurgency. It was the draft. The fucking draft. Canute, they hated the taxes, they hated the fucking draft. They hated his violent fucking bullshit coming around all this time. And then they're going to invade William the Conqueror. So they probably didn't want to do that. They're like, oh shit. Let's, hey everybody. Let's go fight Goliath. Even though David won that fight, the odds were not in David's favor. And it'd probably be very hard to get an army. You would have to get an army, though, right? To fight a Goliath, you have to get an army. But what if Goliath was a good man? Or what if Goliath minded his own business on a different island? What the fuck is your problem with Goliath? Why do we got to go fight William the Bastard? He was a bastard. He didn't even have a father. Let William the Bastard fucking be the king of England for a while. Why do you need to be the king of England, Canute? Fuck, you're already the king of Denmark. Isn't that good enough? You son of a bitch. The history book of Denmark, the Roskilde Chronicle, argues specifically that the rebellion was due to Canute's imposition of a new and unheard of tax called nefgiald. The nefgiald. So the nefgiald was the money for the letting. Fines issued for the peasants breaking the letting of 1085 as specified in the Chronicon Roskildense, plus the Canute's vigorous tithe policy. So both, right? He's going around getting all the tithe, all the produce, all the eggs and coal dust and dirt and whatever the fuck else he can for the church. Give me 10% of your shit. Okay, thank you. Now give me another 10% of your shit because we got to fight a war. Wait, what's this about? I didn't know about this tax, and I don't have money for the tax. Well, looks like you got to give me your land now, or one of your sons, so we could fight in this war. So yeah, the tithes and the new taxes were not well received. And then his brother, Olaf. So Olaf, and you may laugh at Olaf, and you should, because he's going to turn out to be a real shitty fucking king. But he may have been the leader of the rebellious peasants. Okay? So his brother Olaf protested. And Canute was like, why are you protesting? You must be involved. So I'm going to arrest you. So Olaf was arrested and he was exiled to Flanders in chains, believing that Olaf was responsible for the growing unrest. So he blamed Olaf for stirring up trouble. Olaf is put in chains by their brother, by Canute and Olaf's brother Eric, and later King Eric I Evergood. So that's gotta suck for Olaf, right? Olaf is probably just like, you know, the people don't like this goddamn tax you're putting on them. They're afraid of William the fucking bastard. They don't want to fight a fucking bastard. You know, he's never had any love his entire life. He's probably going to be a really, you know, horrible fighter. Probably very vicious, right? So you want us to invade England to go conquer William the Conqueror. He's the conqueror. You're the fucking saint, right, Canute? That's how history remembers you, as a saint or the fourth. And it doesn't even make any sense because, you know, you're the fourth, but you're like, anyways, not his son. You're not even Canute's son. So how are you the fourth? You're not even his grandson. Anyways. So Canute, he's afraid of Olaf. He's banished to Flanders under the supervision of Robert I of Flanders. So what the fuck is all this, you know, extra shit about? All this extra shit. You got 1,060 fucking ships, Canute. They're sitting there in Struer, in northern Jutland, in the Limfjord, Limfjord. So in the Limfjord in northern Jutland, you got 1,060 ships, 1,000 Danish and 60 Norwegian ships ready to go invade England. Meanwhile, he's fucking around arresting his brother, collecting the new taxes, trying to collect extra money. This general is not with his troops. Instead, he's going around the south, you know, fucking everybody up, being a dick. Well, I'm going to go invade William the Conqueror, so I got to be a dick to my country one last time. And then apparently they're saying he was afraid of a German invasion, too. I think Canute was a fucking pussy. Canute IV, he didn't want to go through with it. He didn't want to go through with attacking William the Conqueror, and since he wasn't certain of his vision, his people were not certain of it either. So it took a long time to eventually to pacify the south. So Canute IV wasn't able to go to the north to Struer in Limfjord, northern Jutland, where the 1,000 Danish ships and 60 Norwegian ships were for weeks. Eventually, tired of waiting for Canute IV, the sailors and the warriors and the 1,000 Danish ships all go back home. But not the Norwegian ships, they stayed. But when Canute IV arrived at Struer, finally, in northern Jutland, in the Limfjord, he saw that the fleet had disbanded. He was furious. He was so pissed. He told the Norwegians to go home, but he's like, I'm going to have to deal with these Danish sons of bitches. So Canute IV, he blames the wives of several leading chiefs from Jutland of causing bad weather. Clearly, Canute IV is a fucking genius. Not only is a tyrannical, violent psychopath, but he's stupid. He's fucking superstitious. He was blaming the witches, those damned witches of the leading chiefs. They're the ones who fucked the weather up. They fucked the weather up. It was bad weather. They was like, well, we're not invading this, not this year. It's getting too close to winter time. It's time to go back. We'll invade next year. Which is actually smart, right? Biden for time so he could have had a nice, strong fleet. If he would have just chilled the fuck out, if Canute the Fourth would have just chilled the fuck out. He already got his taxes. He got his tithe. They were going to come back next year, just chill the fuck out, man. But no. Canute the Fourth was a status. He thought he had a monopoly of violence. He's the king. I'm the king. My great-great-grandfather ordered a bunch of assholes to carry his throne, him on his throne out to the sea so he could order the tides to stop. That's the legacy that Canute the Fourth was trying to carry on. So he rightly blames wives, right? Because they're witches, and witches can cast spells and make the weather go fucking crazy. And that's who truly fucked up. Canute the Fourth's invasion. Or Canute. Not Canute. 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 Could you imagine being named Canute? But Canute. Now that's a strong... So Canute's abortive invasion of England marked the end of the Viking Age. The Viking Age was no more. He was going to go after England. He didn't. And then eventually he's going to get killed. And then that's the last time a Viking army assembled against Western Europe. It was the last time. So Canute the Fourth, Saint Canute, while it wasn't intentional, he was a saint because he was a shitty leader and that prevented the war from happening. So that's one way to stop the war, right? Put an incompetent buffoon at the head of it, and then when he fucks everything up, well, just be like, well, maybe we shouldn't do the war anyways. So Canute ordered his officers to collect heavy fines from all the people, all the 1,000 Danish ships who fled, until it would bankrupt them. Not just their officers, but also from their families. So he was going after the families of his own troops, of his own people, after he just collected the taxes on everybody else, threw his fucking brother in jail. He proceeded from assembly to outlaw any man, sailor, peasant, or noble who left Struer without his permission until they paid a heavy fine, more than the annual income of any but the wealthiest of nobles. So, bankrupting everybody, right? He thinks he's so smart, using violence, bankrupting, stealing. He's a fucking Viking. He's a goddamn savage. Within days, the peasants of Vendsyssel, the most northern part of Jutland, rebelled. So the peasants of Vendsyssel, in Vendsyssel, they think that the name of the city where the rebellion began may have derived from the Germanic tribe of the Vandals. So Vendsyssel, Vandals, Vendsyssel, I don't know. But I do know that the people of Vendsyssel, the northern part of Jutland, are my kind of people. They're rebellion. They're rebelling against this shit. They're like, fuck this shit. They're sick of the tyranny. They're sick of the totalitarian fucking bullshit. And so the rebels, or the peasants, rebelled. They're burning down royal property. Royal officers are tortured and murdered. So they're not just going after, Canute the Fourth. They're going after his entire fucking cabinet. All the royal officers, all the royal property. Fuck all royal everything. So the Jute chiefs decide to cast their lot in with the peasants for once. The aristocracy, the nobles, went ahead and said, you know what? We're for the peasant invasion. Yes. Yes. This saves us from having to go to that damn war. I'm sick and tired of this Canute the Fourth. I'm sick of his fucking mouth. So the rebellion spread rapidly after that. The Canute regime is overthrown by this rebellion in Jutland. Peasant revolt broke out in Vendsyssel. That's where Canute was staying in early 1086, July 10th. This is a July 10th thing. This is the whole reason I'm even talking about this. It's because of July 10th. So, Vendsyssel, the peasant rebellion in Vendsyssel, which the nobles joined, and then they got King Canute IV on the run. Canute then sailed to Funen and Schleswig, before finally resolving to go on back to his royal farm, the guard at Odense, by his trusted advisor, Asbjorn Black. Canute and his household and other loyal followers fled from Jutland with the intention of returning to Zealand, where Canute had more support. Asbjorn Black also persuaded the King Canute IV that he could reconcile with the great landowners and their peasants. So he's like, oh, they're not really pissed at you, okay? They're just mad for right now. Don't worry, we can work all this out. Canute IV and his brother Benedict and Eric and their house Carls. House Carl is a secret service, a private bodyguard. So King Canute IV, his brothers Benedict, his brother Eric, and their house Carls go to the king's farm outside of Odense. When the peasants and their leaders realized King Canute IV was at Odense, they're like, fuck yeah, and they raced to the king's farm. But Canute and Benedict fled into the little timbered church. So that was their undoing. They fled. King Canute IV and Benedict fled into the little timber church of St. Albans Priory Church near the river for sanctuary. But the rebels refused to recognize sanctuary. Come out to us, you devil. Too long you have used the edge of your sword to hunt your own people. Now you will feel the edge of our weapons. Prince Benedict and several others defended the doors. The mob hurled stones and arrows through the windows, shouting, "This is for stealing my cow. This is for taking my horses. This is for raping my wives." Since they couldn't get through the heavy outer doors, the mob tried to set fire to the church, but a light rain kept the fire from taking hold. They began tearing at the timber walls to get access. Prince Benedict shouted, "It would be better that you go home to thresh your grain than stand here and exchange blows with the king's men." Right? They're like, don't you have farming to do? Fuck. Don't you have farming to do? You got other shit to do. You can't be killing us if you got all that shit to do back at the farm. The remaining defenders retreated to the choir door, which separated the altar area from the nave of the church. "There he is!" shouted Asbjorn Black, when he pointed to one of the first man of the mob coming through the walls. Prince Benedict saw him kill the first man in the mob to come through the door. But after Prince Benedict killed the first man, the mob hacked Prince Benedict to death. King Canute IV just stood there at the main altar, and he was speared from the front, and then Canute's skull was smashed in. Prince Eric, later King Eric I Evergood, Egil, managed to talk his way out of the king's farm and fled to Zealand, and with his wife and child to Scania. But the 17 house Carls, a member of the bodyguard of a Danish or English king or noble, like the Secret Service, those 17 house Carls were massacred. You're with Canute IV, fine. And they were killed in St. Albans Church. In the church. He was a good Catholic, right? Going around making everybody pay their damn tithes. It's a good Catholic. So, not only was King Canute IV at the main altar, and they said he was praying, "Please, God, tell this mob not to kill me. I believed you. I believed in you." They didn't. That's why they made him a saint. Because he was such a devout Catholic. And because he got killed at the altar. At the altar. July 10th, 1086 in Odense, Denmark. In St. Albans Church. And his brother Benedict and 17 house Carls all died with King Canute IV also. According to the chronicler, something north of Canterbury, Canute IV died following a lance thrust in the flank. So someone took a lance into his abdomen, in the flank, maybe in the side. When Canute IV was killed, Queen Adela and his son Charles fled to Flanders. They should have gone to Flanders to begin with, it sounds like. Canute IV was succeeded by his brother Prince Olaf. Remember the one that they sent to jail? Now Olaf gets the last laugh. Olaf the First. Old King Olaf the First of Denmark. So Olaf the First was a son of the king Sven the Second Estridson, and a third of Swene's sons to rule. He married Ingegard, the daughter of Harald Rowdy, but did not have any children. Olaf was proclaimed king at the Viborg Landsting Assembly, though he was still in Flanders. An arrangement was made to swap Olaf for his younger brother Niels, the later King Niels of Denmark, to permit Olaf to return to Denmark. Upon the return of Olaf, Eric, the one who had arrested him because Canute told him to, fled to Scania. Olaf was the third of Sven's sons to become king of Denmark. Olaf the First was given the nickname Hunger. Oh yeah, King Hunger, King Famine, because he was unable to do anything about the famine and the crop failures that ravaged Denmark for years after Canute IV's assassination. It's almost like God was punishing them for killing the good Catholic Canute who was praying at the altar. The hunger of the people grew so great that they dug the earth looking for roots. They were eating roots. Springtime was so dry that the fields looked like if they had been burnt. But they hadn't. The wealthy grew really thin, and the poor died of starvation. So God was mad, right? This is divine punishment for the sacrilege killing of King Canute IV in a church he declared sanctuary. God damn it. He was just trying to collect some taxes so he could go murder a bunch of English people and try to conquer another foreign people, take more land and power for himself, just like Jesus would have wanted. Nah, King Canute IV is the real victim here. And then Olaf, right? The leader of the peasant rebellion. Maybe not, maybe so, maybe he was just, complaining, who knows? But he becomes king. He starves his damn people. And then he dies in 1095, August 18th, under mysterious circumstances. Saxo Grammaticus writes that Olaf willingly gave himself to loose the land of its bad luck and beg that all of it guilt would fall upon his head alone, so offered he his life for his countrymen. So they don't know where the fuck he was buried. King Olaf is the only Danish monarch where they don't even know, where he was buried. But it's because he wasn't buried. King Olaf's body was quartered, divided up amongst the regions of Denmark. He was offered up as a scapegoat for the blood guilt of Denmark. So the Tree of Liberty, right, needs to be refreshed with the blood of tyrants from time to time. So King Canute IV was killed, and then Olaf apparently either was killed by sacrifice, apparently, or he killed himself. I don't know. It sounds like, my guess is a coup d'etat, and then they just said, oh yeah, he used to be the, where's Olaf? I thought Olaf was king. Yeah, about that. Olaf is not laughing now. So, after King Olaf was killed again, maybe by the peasants again, maybe the peasants killed another fucking king, but he actually lasted a lot longer. He lasted for 10 years. So Olaf got to be king for 10 years. Meanwhile, Canute was only king for 5 years. What the fuck can he do in 5 years? Right? He tried to get some shit together. King Canute, Saint Canute. He tried to kill lots of people, but failed, and therefore became a saint. He didn't even fight for his own life. He just sat on the altar praying. If that's even true. Probably not. He probably was pissing and shitting himself in the corner. But since he's a saint, we got to make his story, you know, pop. We need some pop to this King Canute story. So King Olaf was succeeded by his brother Eric the First Evergood. So Mr. Evergood. Eric the First Evergood. And actually he's real famous. One of his sons barely lives, fights, everybody lives as a sole survivor and then rules for decades. Eric Evergood. So, you know, maybe that's what it takes. Every once in a while you need the blood of tyrants to refresh the tree of liberty. The blood of tyrants and patriots. But it's always the patriots who fucking die. So it's nice to hear some of these tyrants. So one bad tyrant, another bad tyrant, and then a good tyrant comes in. And isn't that really what we the people, isn't that what we want? A good tyrant ruling over us. Someone else making the decisions for us. A benevolent dictator. So, in the end, Canute IV was buried in St. Albans Church where he had died. That's the original church was destroyed during the Danish Civil War between Eric IV and his brother Abel. Odense and St. Albans Cathedral was burned down. 1247 AD. And it was rebuilt with brick Gothic architecture. And it was renamed circa 1300 St. Canute's Cathedral. So Canute IV gets his own church. The church he was killed in is destroyed. They rebuild it with this ugly-ass Gothic architecture. This Gothic brick architecture. Name it after him. St. Canute. And it still exists today. St. Canute's Cathedral still exists today. If you were to go to Denmark, you would find St. Canute's Cathedral. And Canute was, you know, a saint. The Catholic Church beatified him as a saint. It says here Pope Paschal II authorized Canute's cult in 1101. So when you make somebody a saint, you're creating a cult, right? They're all supposed to worship that saint, and there's a cult that happens around that fucking saint. That's weird how they worded that. Pope Paschal II authorized Canute IV's cult in 1101. St. Canute's church's most visited section is the crypt where the remains of Canute and his brother Benedict are on display. There are bones and all. They still have Benedict and Canute IV's bones in the church. That's remarkable. That's so insane. They still, 1,000 years later, still have the bones of this King Canute IV. This asshole that wanted to go fucking invade England, tithing and taxing everybody and being violent and, you know, basically just being a goddamn Viking. A dirty, disgusting fucking Viking. A stereotypical Viking. Canute was nothing more than a stereotypical Viking, and he got what, you know, was coming to him. He got what was coming to him. One last interesting factoid. In Spain, Canute's feast day has become tongue-in-cheek with the holiday for the marijuana legalization movement, appropriating the Spanish version of his name, Canuto, which coincidentally is also the word for a marijuana cigarette. So, Canuto's Day. So if Canute can be turned into Canuto, and we can all just smoke some fucking weed, then, you know, maybe this King Canute IV, maybe he is a saint. Saint Canuto. Saint Marijuana.